Welcome to the newest episode of All Things LOCS. Now, on today's episode, we're going to bring in Dr. Adrienne Towsen, and her story is going to be super helpful for anybody who's in healthcare and is struggling right now deciding what to do with their practice. Obviously, a big conversation in the private practice world in healthcare is, do I want to sell my practice to private equity or do I not? And if you get to a point where you're thinking about maybe selling practice, what do you do? And that's definitely a question that a lot of physicians and just medical providers in general have started to ask themselves, what's the end game look like for my practice? What's going to happen when I'm ready to sell or retire? And ultimately, where Dr. Towsen comes into play is that she was part of a practice for 19 years that got bought out by private equity. And unfortunately, her practice started changing in a way that didn't really align with her values, and it really affected the culture. And this is something that we're going to dive into very deeply in this episode, where she's going to break down what was maybe promised, so to speak, by, her clinic getting bought out by private equity. What was the thought process? And then what happened over the course of a few years where just, after 19 years, she decided to leave. However, that's not the end of her journey. She decided to open up her own practice, which, overcoming a lot of fears. And it's something that a lot of physicians and medical providers think about, but don't ultimately take the plunge. So if you're contemplating, hey, what do I do? Or maybe I'm in a private equity setting and I'm not happy, like to maybe open my own practice and take some control back, within my own career. This is really going to be a high-level conversation that you need to listen to. We'll catch you guys there. Dr. Adrienne Towsen, pleasure to be on the podcast. Actually, really just a pleasure to meet you somewhat in person. I know we've been obviously communicating back and forth on LinkedIn, but really glad to kind of see you in the flesh, so to speak. But we just want to really dive right in. Obviously, we were just talking a minute ago about the journey of exiting a company that got bought out by private equity, but really just want to maybe start with a tiny little backstory of what your career has been like up to this point, kind of recent before you exited your last practice, and then we can kind of maybe go into what the more recent times have been like.
Sure. Glad to. Yeah. So thanks for having me. Really excited to be here with you guys. So my story is basically I've been in practice in the same community, which is Westchester, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia, for the past 21 years. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, residency, fellowship trained in sports medicine. I had one job out of fellowship where I was hospital employed for 2 years, and then following that, in 2006, I joined the practice that I just left. So I stayed for just shy of 19 years with a practice that I loved for a very long time, and served a great community here as an orthopedic surgeon, focusing primarily on shoulder and knee surgery. So again, I did sports medicine. Aside from that, I'm a single mom. I have 2 adult daughters, and my passion is competitive ballroom dancing.
Yeah, that's an understatement for sure.
Yeah.
But all right, so you're in the practice for 19 years, which nowadays in and of itself is a little bit of an anomaly, right? People staying out long, but obviously the million-dollar question can be, what had to transpire in that practice for you to decide that it wasn't the best play for you to stay there longer than you already had been?
Yeah, for sure. My practice, I firmly believe it was something special, to your point. I mean, I think a lot of people don't have quite that number of years. We pretty much had something where people didn't want to leave. We really had cultivated a practice and an environment. We were a small private practice when I joined. I was number 5 joining the group. And I think, fast forward, looking back, you don't realize just how wonderful that was. I mean, certainly I appreciated it at the time, but then as things evolved over time, you realize that as you get bigger, and there's a lot of kind of a push to get bigger as healthcare evolved over these years, things change and you get further away from maybe like your main purpose. We try not to lose that, which of course is taking great care of our patients. And we had, like I said, we had kind of just a really special group. We had, by the time we were entering our private equity deal, we were part of a much bigger super group, but our division of the super group was 10 of us, and we all got along. We all had very similar values in, how we practiced, how we took care of patients. We were all friends. We could hang out socially, which is a hard thing to, kind of achieve when you've got a bunch of surgeons and potential egos and all of that. And we, again, I think had something really special. Again, we were part of this super group, and that happened probably about 5 or 6 years later. So maybe 2010, 11, I can't remember exactly. And then we were ultimately part of a group that was about 75 docs. And that was the larger super group, again, with the pressure to kind of continue to grow and get bigger bigger, which, bigger isn't always better, but that really seems to be the way in healthcare these days. And in recent years, there was a push to put ourselves out there for private equity so that we could continue to grow in our neighborhood, because we're not far from Philadelphia, so there's some bigger health systems there. So we were kind of trying to, we had been doing a good job, at least I think most of us thought, doing a good job of protecting our reputation and, staying busy despite the fact that we had some big competitors around us. But the leadership of our super group, basically said around 2019, 2020 that our next step was private equity, because they weren't going to be able to keep, getting us bigger, and that's what we needed to do.
I was going to say really quick, not to interrupt, but the motivation to join the other practice back in, I think you said 2010, was that simply due to, hey, let's just get bigger quicker?
Yeah, somewhat. We were also, pretty content the way we were. The practice when I joined in 2006 had already been in the community for maybe 20 years or so, and was very much a, well-loved community practice, built very much by word of mouth. We were associated with a community hospital that at the time wasn't part of a health system either. So it was, again, obviously a thing of the past, not that you still can't find it now, but, that was our situation at first. And then as the times evolved a bit, we were approached by a group that was forming kind of in the next county over. And the reason behind it was exactly that, like strength in numbers, right? We need to continue to get bigger. The smaller, we weren't really like a mom and pop, practice. Granted, we were at that point maybe 8 of us, so we were like a larger, small private practice, but still, joining together to have more, let's say, power with regard to insurance companies and negotiations for, reimbursement contracts, things like that. The group was also, the super group was also doing ancillary services that we did not have. So, they had already a structure in place for physical therapy, for MRI, and they wanted to expand. Like I mentioned, they were in the next county over, so Delaware County, closer to Philadelphia. We're just a little bit farther out. And so we were the first group in kind of as they expanded west, basically, that they wanted to just continue to grow these ancillary services as well. So, ultimately, it was a hard decision for us. Even then, like, we didn't want to lose our identity. We really loved what we had grown, and we were doing fine. But kind of the writing was on the wall that it was like, you probably need to be bigger, because everything is just getting bigger, even already at that time. So we debated for a while and finally said it's probably the right move. I'm not sure we said it's definitely the right move, but we said it's probably the right move. And so we did it. And for the first, I don't know, maybe 6 months to a year, we weren't sure still if it was the right move for us. We were really trying to still hold on to our identity. But ultimately, it turned out to be a pretty good ride for a while. And the super group, they'd still let us run kind of divisionally. So our day-to-day practice was still pretty much what we wanted it to be, which we liked. It ended up making us kind of fragmented, which became a problem later, if you will. Yeah. We can talk about it with regard to the private equity thing, but we still kind of did our day-to-day the way we wanted, and then we benefited certainly from having that bigger structure with regard to just what they said, getting a little bit better contracts with certain insurers, payers, and then we had our own MRI near us. We developed a couple of physical therapy centers, and that was good. It was a helpful transition at the time.
So when you get to the point where I'm kind of curious to know what is going on in the company and even within the market, when you get to the point where the company is saying, hey, maybe private equity is the next stage of evolution, like what's going on in you guys' head where you're saying, yeah, this might be the progression for us?
Yeah, so I think me personally, I'm not the most business oriented, so I've had a lot to learn, especially in my recent transition, and I think many of us are that way. I think many physicians are that way in general. So the leadership of our super group was in part physician. We had a board of physicians, of course. We had a CEO. The CEO for a while was one of the physicians, the founding, the founding doc for the group. But then it was ultimately an actual CEO was in place. And, basically, like I was saying before, kind of the thought was we've got these 2 very large health systems, Jefferson and Penn, like in Philadelphia, so that are continually moving out into the suburbs with their satellite offices and locations and whatnot. And so for us, even as the super group, of course, we're still a private practice, but for us to be able to continue to compete, they were saying that the leadership was saying that we need help, we need a partner, we need more capital, we need more infrastructure. We've taken it as far as we can, and this is the next move. We'll be stagnant. We run the risk of these other guys kind of overtaking us and overtaking the market share if we don't continue to expand. And so for many of us, we were just kind of like, okay, we don't necessarily know any better. Certainly there was some skepticism about it though too. And this was a couple years in the making. It certainly didn't just happen overnight, but we, for the most part, most of us kind of trusted that, okay, this is the way to go. And honestly, I mean, we can get into a little bit more. There's some things that seem attractive about it at the beginning. It actually doesn't look like a bad decision the way it's presented to you for the most part. And being part of this super group, we already start to kind of get removed a little bit from feeling like you're in control. I mean, yes, we were in private practice, but I don't know, it certainly didn't feel the same as, years prior when I joined the group and there was 8 of us, and we made our decisions around this conference room table with a meeting once a month, So at this point, I think many of us probably weren't educated well enough to understand the potential outcomes that wouldn't necessarily be exactly what was sold to us.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take. Where, in my opinion, I do kind of see where that can happen. Where you have doctors where they want to stick to practicing. They're brilliant doctors, but as there is like writing on the wall that the organization is growing, that there's MBAs that are being hired that are thrown into leadership positions, executives, and their goal is revenue. So it's just to build and build and build. What do you recommend that these physicians do that, like, hey, if you're seeing kind of this writing on the wall, it's incumbent to you to maybe read up on some business literature, or read this book, or to maybe do this, so that you are far more equipped to kind of understand what's going on and really kind of voice your opinions, not coming from a place of, all right, whatever you think is best, to like, what, I actually think this is going to really hurt our community. So what would you recommend to maybe physicians that are kind of looking around and be like, man, like Dr. Adrienne, I'm in this situation now. Yeah. What should I maybe, do to educate myself?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that is just key right there, is just educating yourself and educating yourself about all potential outcomes, right? So, I mean, you're going to be without a doubt sold a very pretty picture of, how things can look and, the benefits to you from this deal. I would read the book Plunder. I would read the book Bad Company. I mean, there's others, there's plenty. Those are a couple books that I read after the fact, that just were, brought tears to my eyes. In fact, as I was even just the one I was listening to, and I'm driving in my car and just like tears are streaming down my face just with the introduction, So I think, seeking out, whether it's through, the written word or what, through books or other, types of media, seeking out people who've been through it before. And it's not to say that our group didn't do its due diligence, and we had committee upon committee, that was created around this deal. And those of us who were maybe not involved in these committees kind of, again, trusted what others were doing and finding, and maybe they just weren't, overturning the right, rocks or whatever and seeing, because they would talk to some other groups that went through it, even with the same company that bought us. Mind you, there were a couple of quote unquote failures that were kind of brushed under the rug, and we were put in contact with people who were supposedly their success stories. That being said, I mean, since leaving and since being somewhat outspoken about it on LinkedIn in particular, I've had people send me DMs a lot about either being in the situation or having gone through the same thing. And, I think that's also certainly a way, like, network and find other people, because there's plenty of us, now, unfortunately or fortunately, who have some experience with this and can also, can educate others in that way. So I'd say, for sure, like reading about it, or, seeking out, others that have gone through it, and really understanding all the possibilities. I'm not saying there's never a positive outcome, but I think it's rare. I think, all I hear, most of what I've heard is all negative.
Yeah, I've kind of heard that too, where there are, people that sell, multiple locations to private equity, and they hear it from the grapevine, from members of their community that they've, established relationships with for, 10, 20 years. And then it's like, hey man, like I used to get, such and such checked out at this facility or this, and then now like I'm trying to bring my kid or my grandma or someone there, and the staff sucks. Like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, I sold it. And they're like, why did you sell it? And there's this pressure that comes from that where it's like, man, I feel like I'm really hurting my own community by doing this.
Yeah. I mean, that happened with us in a big way, especially maybe not the first year, but into like the second and third years. We had a lot of patient dissatisfaction, and we were putting out fires left and right to try to hang on to these patients that have been part of our practice, some of them for, 20 plus years, generations of family and whatnot. And it was tough. It was a tough pill to swallow because we worked so hard, especially as I was mentioning when the practice started, when I joined, back in 2006 and before, it was all word of mouth reputation. I mean, it was all like built in this community. We all live in this community. Our kids are in schools here. Like we have so many connections through the community, and to be really hard to feel like you're just, even though it wasn't necessarily our direct doing, like you're disappointing these people who have learned to rely on you for all these years. And we would hear that often, like, like, what the hell's going on with your practice? Like, what do you guys do? Like, we can't get through. We can't call. Like, so many complaints came through once some of the infrastructure started changing.
I was just saying, was there a particular moment? Yeah, obviously making the decision after being there for 19 years, it's not an easy one, but was there a particular moment or day where you just was like, this is the straw that broke camel's back and that's it, I'm done?
Yeah, actually there was. I mean, it was, brewing over months for sure. I mean, I will say the first year, so our deal was done in 2022, and the first year was not horrible. It was sort of indifferent, not much change for better or worse. It started a little bit more in the second year as things started to be, started to change. They started to get more involved. Things started to become an issue financially. Things started to become an issue with the operations of our practice. But I ended up resigning in November of 2024, and then I ultimately worked for 6 more months there and left in May of 2025, so approaching a year ago, so 9 months ago. But it was a weekend on call, actually. So we worked with a community hospital, not a trauma center, but still a big community hospital. So weekends on call, we would do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you were always busy. You could always be guaranteed at least a few hip fractures and consults in the hospital. So, most weekends you're working the better part of the day, both Saturday and Sunday. And this it was in November. I've been a particularly busy weekend, multiple hip fractures, whatnot. And I had just been so miserable for a while leading up to that, and spent, all day, both days in the hospital doing hip fractures. Felt like I was basically volunteering my time for what I was getting paid at that point regarding all of the, private equity management fees and things that had just been, inflated, and our, the physicians were basically kind of left with the scraps. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And so I came home on that Sunday night after working, all day in the OR, and I said, I'm done. Like I just sat down at my computer and I wrote a letter and I sent it off Monday morning. And like I said, it was truly an abrupt decision because it was brewing for a while, but that was like the time where I said, like, why am I killing myself? Like I enjoyed my work, don't get me wrong, but we were busy and trying to be just busier all the time to please who? To please the private equity people who were in charge of us, and it just wasn't working for me anymore, and I was just done. So
yeah,
that's how it happened.
Oh my gosh. I feel like, when you look at any other business, when you have disgruntled employees, they're just unhappy. And I'm not throwing you under the bus on this. This is, but that just anywhere else, I don't care if you're running a marketing agency, a hot dog stand, a construction site, doesn't matter. If people are really feeling like, man, this is some bullshit, just that thought in their head, that quality of performance really dips. And not saying that any of your procedures were half-assed in any way, but my mother's a nurse. Like I have a lot of family members that are in healthcare, and they're human just like anybody else. If someone is feeling that way, where they're like, man, I really feel like I'm getting gypped. This is whack, and they're starting to feel like maybe their performance is dipping. What do you feel like they should do, especially as a surgeon like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to like, kind of really reevaluate your situation. I mean, the best way I can describe it for me is it was really getting unsustainable. And, not that I would ever try to, or ever want to, or feel like I wasn't giving my best to a patient, be it in the office or the OR, but it was getting hard to do. I'm not gonna lie. I mean,
Yeah,
we were
that's real.
working, like my division was one of the larger divisions within this super group. We were the most profitable historically. And then, part of what happened is our group, as I mentioned earlier, was looked at very divisionally when, before this happened. And so we, managed our own finances. We had our own compensation plan. And, my division did very, very well. Some of the other divisions in my group weren't as strong, and that's fair and that's fine. But then when we went to under this private equity model, we were looked at as a unit of one, and so then that compounded the problem, because the private equity, of course, is the big evil here in my opinion. They're taking tons and tons, millions of dollars a month out of the practice. But we're also then subsidizing other divisions of the practice that are not as strong and folks that maybe aren't as busy. And so when you take the busiest group and then you try to just crack the whip and make them busier, I mean, there's only so much one person can do in a 24-hour period, or, and we were already working 10, 12, 14-hour days sometimes. And, again, just being miserable constantly is not a way to live. So I think we often take that on ourselves a little bit as physicians, even if you're not in a situation like this, that, we're just, we bury our heads in the sand, we work hard, we take care of patients, we accept what insurance gives us, we just do it. We do, take home a lot of stress and worry and anxiety and make calls from home and do all these things that we're really not ever compensated for. And when you start to say, hey, like, I have some value here, like, more so than I'm being, attributed, then you need to make a change. And I think if someone's feeling that way, you need to really like reevaluate and take a deep hard look at it and be like, look, I need to make a change. I need to do something better for myself, because, I think that's how people go down a really bad rabbit hole sometimes with, then being, physically, mentally just destroyed. And, I mean, we don't have to talk about physician suicide and all of that, but like there's some bad stuff, that happens sometimes.
It can get ugly.
I was nowhere near that, of course. But that being said, I mean, I think I left without a plan, but I knew I couldn't keep doing the same thing. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do exactly, but I know I can't keep doing this because, at the time I was, 53 years old, like my practice, I had my dream job. I loved, my practice, loved my partners. I would have stayed there for another 10 years or whatever, but it was not our practice anymore. And it was not my dream job anymore. And even though I loved my patients in the community too, I'm like, I'm just, I'm lighting the candle at both ends. I can't, I'm not a young kid anymore.
Not a spring chicken anymore. Yeah.
And whatever, I'm like, I can't do this. And I can't be so undervalued anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting you say that. You're most physicians, in their 50s, they're thinking about slowing down. They're thinking about like, all right, let me kind of hang the gloves up and maybe ride off into the sunset. But you are not doing that. You are starting over, looking to help again. Why do that versus just riding off into the sunset and maybe enjoying retirement?
Or just or just even joining another practice.
Yeah, so great questions. First, very easy answer is I don't have the financial stability to ride off into any sort of sunset. So, I mean, I was a single mother of 2 daughters without any help from their father. For all the years I had my kids when I was a resident. I got divorced right at the end of my residency, like officially during my fellowship. So I had tremendous help from my parents in raising my kids, but from a financial standpoint, I had some help from my ex-husband, their father, until they were 18, pretty minimal. But after that, no. So I had, two very bright, wonderful, amazing young women, and very expensive private colleges and all the things, right? So and then I'm not done work. I mean, again, I don't know what else I would do. I mean, I could dance more, I guess, but I still have time to give in medicine, and I'm still passionate about what I do. So So the decision was, when I left, I said I knew what I didn't want to do. I did not want to join a big health system. That's kind of exchanging one corporate nightmare for another. I did not want to join another practice. I'll be, I was very humbled, and it was very flattering. I had probably 6 or 7 job offers, to go join other practices. Of course, I had a non-compete to deal with, so it would have meant either a very long commute or moving, which is another thing I didn't want to do. So I'm very happy with where I live. I'm still a single person. I have a, nice circle of friends here, and that's important. I didn't really want to go start over somewhere else. So I said, I'm not joining another practice. I also, as I mentioned, I really had my dream job. My group was the best. And I'm sure other groups are great, but I just couldn't imagine starting over again and a new dynamic with new partners and all of that. And I just, I had a great team at the surgery center where I worked. There was so much that was still wonderful about where I was. So I knew I wasn't going to recreate that anywhere else. I had it. I kind of almost felt the same way as when I got divorced. It's I had a great marriage while it lasted. And I said when I got divorced, I'm never getting married again. And I haven't. But when I left my practice, I said, I'm not joining another group. I'm not joining a health system. And so ultimately what I decided to do was, again, open my own clinic. And because I did not want to leave where I practice, so again, this town where I live is amazing, and my patient population is here, I decided to make a pivot in what I was doing. And, so I've kind of pivoted out of orthopedics. My practice had been sports medicine. So I, dealt a lot with the 40, 50, 60-year-old, kind of weekend warrior or more serious athlete, who wants to, keep going and keep doing what they want to do for as long as possible, which is my philosophy as well as a dancer. So I went down the sort of health optimization, performance medicine, wellness road, and it's been super fulfilling. My first day, so I'm sitting in my new office, and it was a process and it was a lot of learning, but I actually start, seeing patients or clients or whatever we're going to end up calling them tomorrow. Yeah. So pretty excited about it.
What I'm just curious because it's a big plunge. You have obviously the skills, you have the personality, you can tell people love working with you, but there's still, it's not for everybody, right? Saying I'm going to open my own practice, even when you're experienced and knowledgeable. So what are some, because there's other people out there, right? I wanted to maybe kind of join these questions up. You have other people that you mentioned, other doctors hitting you up saying, hey, I'm going through the same thing. What the hell can I do? And then the easy answer is probably just, well, open your own practice. But then there's a lot of fear that lives inside of us. So what are some things that maybe you had to overcome before you're just saying, I'm going to do it, screw it. I have the fear, but.
Yeah. So I will say, I did a lot of networking on LinkedIn. So I will put a huge shout out to LinkedIn because about a year and a half ago, so before I was sure I was going to leave my practice, I had been on the platform for many years, but didn't really use it hardly at all. And then I started doing a little bit more. I did a post about physician burnout that got a lot of engagement, and it was just kind of a random thing. But then I started realizing, hey, maybe there's more to it, to this LinkedIn thing, and started getting more serious about it and started meeting some really great people through that. So I'm in this really cool network of people, and a lot of them are more healthcare entrepreneurial type, so that kind of, started me thinking in that way. But I give the majority of the credit to another wonderful human that I met through LinkedIn who is my business coach, so I have somebody who's been helping me along the way to really figure a lot of the let's say business part of it out, because that was something brand new to me, but I think that guidance and kind of just guidance and direction was huge. So I think if it's even crossing someone's mind, I will say there's plenty of people out there who who can help and who know more than you do about the things that you need to know, and I would seek that out because I'm sure it would have taken me much longer, and there would have been a lot more fear and overwhelm involved if I didn't have somebody who was helping me steer this ship a bit.
Yeah. It's, shout out to coaches. That's, sure. I feel like they make the world go around. There's a couple things you mentioned that I wanted to hit on and not necessarily gloss over, because you mentioned a couple of words. One was burnout, and then one was dance. And I actually think there's an association there. And here's what I mean by that, is that especially with what you do or in healthcare, there is a lot of pressure. You mentioned, 10, 12, 14-hour days, and people get burnt out. How important is it for physicians, for healthcare professionals to have a creative outlet or a physical outlet, something that allows them to release that? Because I think dance is incredibly therapeutic.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's of the utmost importance. I could not be more in favor of it. And, I was like fortunate enough to find dance. I started dancing in 2018. So I will say before that, I really focused mostly on raising my kids because, again, I was a single mom and I had a lot of help from my parents, as I mentioned. But, most of my time was either work or my kids, which was amazing. And then it was really once they got into high school. And I mean, during that time, I exercised and we traveled some. And, I was a little bit, I did some long distance running before that too. So as my kids got a little bit older, I got a little bit back into running first for a while, did some half marathons, a couple marathons. And then as they were in high school, I was thinking, okay, there's really going to be a bigger void. And I ran because I could, and it was good exercise, and you could set goals with the races, but I didn't really love it. So I was trying to find something else that would, kind of excite me and also be a good balance and a good escape, if you will, from, the rigors of, these days we spend in medicine. So we had been huge fans of watching Dancing with the Stars and just always really enjoyed watching it. And so then I, decided to just take lessons for fun and learn some social dancing. And then I learned all about the competition world, which I did not know about before I started. And then dove in with both feet and have been, competing internationally and dancing for the past 8 years. So
nice.
And during the time, especially throughout the private equity issue too, it was huge for me because I'd usually take 3 dance lessons a week, compete about 4 or 5 times a year, and there's some travel involved with that, which is again a literal escape, and it was so helpful to me to have something to just at times it was also like still even stressful because it's an expense, and the private equity couple years there were quite draining physically, mentally, and financially. So but I didn't want to give it up, and so I was able to kind of skate by and keep going with it, and it was so huge for me. So I think whatever it might be, I think having an outlet is so important.
Can you quickly tell us, like, imagine if that didn't exist, and you said like it was about 8 years. Imagine if that didn't exist, that outlet, what would that have caused you mentally and physically, just in kind of being in that space of that constant burnout and not having that outlet? Like what would imagine how you would be?
Yeah, I think pretty awful, actually. I mean, I think I would have spiraled probably, quicker and worse than I did, but it was, I mean, I think it saved me in many ways, to have that and have something, that was still like a happy part of my life. I mean, I had my kids, but my family otherwise is small. I mean, I have my parents, who certainly were hugely supportive, but my kids were off in college, or one was already graduated from college, and neither one of them lives nearby. And so, that it was hard. I mean, some of my other partners, I'm not the only one who left either. 2 of my other good friends, partners from my division left. 3 of us from my division left. So we had a little bit of solidarity amongst ourselves and could vent to each other and support each other and whatnot. But I think the level of just, being so unhappy and feeling so just overworked and undervalued and miserable would have really been off the charts, if I didn't have dance to kind of balance it out somewhat.
It's interesting because you do talk to a lot of doctors and just medical professionals, and they get so wrapped up with just that identity of who they are, right? It's like, I went to school to be a doctor and that's who I am, and I'm not a dancer and they kind of peg themselves in to something, and then they can't escape. It's almost like a self-made prison, so to speak. And then they look at, if I have other interests, maybe am I really taking away from my own profession? Whereas for you, it's like, it actually made me better almost. Because then I look at, and I've seen bias, obviously, because I see on social media, but then you talk a lot about how, discovering dance and the consistency and commitment to it has actually, I don't know if I want to say made you a better doctor, but it helped make you understand your patients a little bit better. And I'm curious to know, would you say that's been a big push for you to change the direction in which you're steering your new company versus sports medicine? Like, I'm going to do longevity because of this experience for yourself these last few years?
Yeah, great question. And yes, for sure, there's a lot of overlap there. So I think, the dance piece for me is there's a few factors that play in. Number one, I started it later in life, right? So I started dancing at age 46. I had never danced before. I played other sports when I was younger and whatnot. So for, starting at that age, and I wasn't a natural when I started. I honestly thought I'd be better than I was when I started. I was pretty shitty when I started, and I give my teacher a lot of credit because he worked wonders with me. But I stuck with it, and I loved it despite not being great at it at first, and saw that he saw some potential, and maybe I did too, and I just loved it. So talking about like discipline, consistency, and like sticking with something, even if you're not great at it at first. I didn't know anything about it at first, didn't know anything about the competition world, and so that's one thing. Now with like opening my own clinics, same thing. Like I again, as I mentioned, I have the help of my coach for sure. I'm a physician, but number one, I've never started my own practice from scratch before, and number two, I'm going into kind of a newer area of medicine. So I'm the expert in orthopedic sports medicine, but I'm not the expert exactly, or don't quite feel like it yet, in what I'm doing now. So the excitement about learning something new and getting involved is huge, and that was the same with dance. So I think learning something new, not being afraid of it, sticking with it, realizing it'll take some time, realizing that discipline and consistency are the name of the game. I think that's part of it. The second thing is starting something like this that is physically demanding. It's actually like great for your mental state too, because like I do many different dances, and we've got a lot of choreography and different routines, so it keeps you very stimulated, not only physically but mentally. It's just such a great sport. And doing that in like midlife now, I'm 54 now, soon to be 55, and it really keeps me motivated to to stay in shape, to do the things I need to do. Dancing in and of itself is great exercise, but you need to do other things. And doing these things through midlife, staying active, is really what I want to be able to help other people do. And I see how much it benefits me, and I see, how important it is to try to, live your best years don't have to be behind you, even in your 50s. I firmly believe that they can still be ahead of you. And there's a lot of wonderful things that come with aging, a lot of wisdom and experience, and, a lot of like, I don't give a shit attitude anymore, which is great. So you want to maximize that moving forward, I think, and you have to be strong and healthy to do it. So, and if you have an amazing sport or activity on top of it that you want to kind of like train for and be healthy for, it's icing on the cake. So I think, dancing for me is a great like kind of like metaphor or analogy for exactly where my life is headed right now.
You got to practice what you preach. I don't think anybody wants to go to nobody wants to go to a doctor who's fat and out of shape, right? It's like, me coming from physical therapy, you do hear patients say, I can't do that, I'm 50. I'm like, okay, and what's your point? So you got to be an example. But I did want to, you're talking about the length and the duration, and I do see a lot of similarities between you're starting a dance versus starting a business. And something kind of caught my eye. I was like looking at one of your posts the other days, and kind of just get to the end. It's like, for the first time in 8 years, I truly thought I'm a dancer, right? And it's just where I find out that's very relevant, though, is the duration. I know a lot of people would probably not even take up dance at 47, like you said, but then they'd start and say, I suck. This is hard. This is, let me just quit now. And it's like 8 years, like, I finally feel like I've arrived. What is it actually? I think there's a lot of people out there who are maybe, especially on the physician side or just medical professional side, who are maybe contemplating starting their own practice, and they have a lot of the same concerns. Looking at this journey, even through dance, what would you tell somebody? Because it's very easy to say, hey, just take the first step, just get started, right? Like that's such, I say crap advice, but you hear that all over social media. What would you say some real things that, even just looking at dance, saying this would be very relevant for somebody who's maybe looking at getting bought up by private equity and contemplating starting their own practice? How does that translate over?
Yeah, I would say, to your point, yes. Deciding to start, yes, that's of course important, but it's the not giving up. It's the not giving up when it seems hard, or when it seems like that you're not getting rewarded for it. Because, I will say, like early on in the first few years of dancing, it was always fun. And I think, even in my like journey up until this point of starting this practice, there's always the underlying theme of it's exciting, it's mine. And like, it's like, I don't know, like you feel, that much more motivated, I do anyway, to like make it a success. And, also, there's some naysayers. There's some people that are like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're an orthopedic surgeon, I mean, there's that too that I've dealt with a little bit now. But on the other hand, by and large, it's been like huge support. So I think, trying to find and surround yourself with supportive people is important, because on the days when you're maybe feeling like you're not getting anywhere, someone can maybe take a step back and look and say, well, but wait, look what you've accomplished, thus far, and give yourself some time. And my coach was that for me, and my closest friends were that for me, and my family. And in dance, as my dance teacher, because I'm like, there were times where, we didn't do as well at a competition early on, or I mean, even in the past few years. And competitions aren't everything, and placements aren't everything. And I think that's important too, like, in starting your own business, that you have to kind of, at first, maybe things are messy, they're not perfect, and you're not winning first place and whatever, but that's okay. Like, you really have to keep going with it. And, your patients are your best teachers. I think competition by competition, I always learn something more. I gain some sort of experience, whether it's about a particular dance or a particular step, or just my attitude on the dance floor and whatnot. And so it's just been such an evolution and it's been kind of a labor of love. And I think anybody starting your own practice, I would have to believe, or I would hope it would kind of be a labor of love in the same way. So, for me with dance, honestly, it probably took about 5 years to get to a point where I really felt like I was, kind of having true fun on the dance floor. And it's hard for me to describe. It was fun always. It was fun when I was at a beginner level, executing steps. My teacher always made it fun. But once we started doing a little bit more advanced choreography and things, it got a lot more fun. And honestly, to your point, like with my post recently, we just did a competition a few weeks ago, and it was competition number 41. I'm 8 years in, and it really was the first time that I watched our videos back and said, wow, like, that's me, like, almost like, I can't believe it's me, and it was such validation. And yeah, it's been 8 years. And there's been plenty of fun times over the 8 years, and there's also been hard times. But I guess point being, you just gotta like wait out the bad times a little bit and just, stay focused and keep going, because if you do that, there's no question it's going to get better. I mean, I firmly believe that. There's no question. And like, this last competition that we did and watching these videos, the other thing that's interesting for me is when I watch the videos, I get to see my teacher's face more, because sometimes we are looking at each other and there can be good interactions and you can smile at each other, and some dances you're supposed to smile, other dances you don't really so much. But when I watch the videos, if we were side by side or I was in front of him, I won't see his face, but then I can see his face in the videos, and I can see him smile, or I can see a certain look that he gives that says, yeah, okay, like, I'm proud, like, she's doing a good job, and I don't have to worry about her, she's my partner now, like, she's not my student so much. And that's like the greatest thing ever. So yeah. So, I mean, I think things also take longer than you think, probably 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So
that's
the other thing is,
I was gonna say, there is this saying from Tony Robbins, like, we overestimate what we can do in a year, but then it's like we underestimate what we can do in 10. But then it's like, yeah, I'll be an expert in 2 years, and then it's like 7 years later, it's like, all right, is it time yet? Am I an expert yet? So, but patience does pay off.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, well, again, just congratulations on the business, serving patients, tomorrow.
Thanks.
That's very, very exciting. I kind of want to put my operator hat on and kind of ask you a couple of things, related to the business, and just kind of use this segment to maybe educate others that are going to be doing the same thing. Is that as you build this particular business, what are some things that you are not going to get bogged down with that maybe you tolerated before in the past?
I think, well, first of all, this is going to be a cash pay practice, so there's that right off the bat. So I think
way different. Yeah,
one of the biggest things is obviously not dealing with the whole insurance issue. So, so I'm excited about that. And I think that will take, a lot of kind of like stress and a lot of logistical nightmares kind of off the table right there. I think I will build, or, try to build super intentionally. I'm, being the one who is like making the decisions, will be so nice for me. I have a team kind of waiting in the wings that some of the people I have actually worked with before in different places. So I have like a nurse and a front desk person and ultimately a PA who I will bring on. Right now it's going to be kind of a one-woman show, but I think, cultivating a team, I think, is key. And maybe I wasn't so much, part of it before, or let's say bogged down by it before or whatnot, but I think that's so crucial moving forward, is being super intentional about, who you work with and who joins your team, and kind of developing and streamlining things right from the beginning, hopefully trying to have good processes in place right from the start. So I think I'm in the process of kind of developing that now, honestly. I have, I think, a really good software system, EMR. So, I think that's important. I think kind of just figuring out like the flow and how we're going to, go day to day is also important. I've, decided on having some evening hours and some early morning hours and doing some things to try to be more like patient friendly. So I think, keeping the patient or the client or whatever we're calling them, as the main focus is key. So, I think, again, other anything else I got bogged down with. I mean, before, I think it was just more like, I don't know, like I wasn't bogged down with this stuff. Maybe I wish I was. Maybe I wish I was more involved in the decision making, right? So, that's what did not happen, as the practice got bigger, and I just felt more like, just a cog in the wheel. I was just doing my part, even though I was supposed to be a partner and an owner and all of that. Certainly didn't feel like it. Felt very much like a, just kind of any level employee. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like when you've built the practice, there's something wrong with that. So, I want to be a good leader, but I'm always one of the team. But you build the right team, and it's a great place to be.
What's one thing that you are going to be keeping an eye on the next 90 days to basically inform you, like, hey, we're doing well, we're kicking ass? What are a couple things that maybe you're keeping your eyes on, and then what would you recommend other people kind of do too as they're taking on this journey?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, the financials themselves, of course, seeing how many people are coming through the door and seeing, at first, can I cover our monthly expenses? I'm super excited to kind of figure out and see the timing to be able to hire somebody. So that's, like I said, I have this team waiting in the wings. So I want to be able to hopefully map out, and hopefully before 90 days be able to hire somebody. So even within the first 30 days or 60 days, kind of see where I am, try to map it out, see what's going on from a, kind of community interest standpoint. So, as far as kind of outreach, presently, I mean, I'm doing things just primarily through social media and word of mouth. I've had a bit of an kind of an open house little celebration here, which was great. I have, one bonus of being in the same community for 21 years, which is also why I didn't want to leave, is that I have a ton of relationships here, so I know a lot of people, and people are, reaching out to me left and right. So I think, I want to make sure that there's, the, kind of steady stream of people coming through, and that I'm providing the value back that they're expecting. So I think I want to be able to, kind of map out what I can truly handle as far as patient volume in a week, and make sure I can, get to that limit, hopefully get a little beyond it, and then, start to think about hiring somebody. So be paying attention to how I get through the days, what the financial situation looks like, and, what more I maybe need to do to then start like marketing further. Because I'm like kind of deliberately not doing a ton more right now because it's just me. So I know that like, I also don't want to be, let's say, overwhelmed and then not be able to like provide the care. Because part of what I'm planning and excited about doing is, spending a lot more time with patients. There's, for certain patients with the stuff that I'm working on now, it is going to take time. It's going to take, going over lots of lab values, going over, lots of goals and things and plans and whatnot. So we're talking 60-minute, 90-minute consultations. We're talking, follow-ups, couple weeks, even if it's, over the phone or via like a telemedicine, to like see if what we're doing is making a difference. So I think it is, just kind of a new way for me. So I'm going to have to like make sure I can structure that well, and it's going to be like a time management situation as well.
What are some systems that, even though right now, again, you're keeping it very manageable, which I think is smart, right? You don't want to have 60 people within the first week, like, oh crap, how do I service them? But what are some systems that, you may be putting in now that you might not need, just so when you're busy and you're ramped up and you have more volume, you're not working in an environment that's chaotic?
Well, I think right now I'm just kind of looking at how many people could I potentially really see in a day, and just trying to like limit that. So, I mean, honestly, tomorrow I just have 2 appointments, and honestly, I feel like that's a full day for me, which is so strange to think about, right? So I think it's just right now, I feel like I have to give myself, probably an excessive amount of time in order to spend the time with the patient, but then also afterward to like be able to like review everything myself and like go over everything and come up with the most comprehensive plan. So I think right now I'm just, kind of trying to allow myself as much time as possible, allow myself like kind of this wiggle room and whatnot that I won't necessarily want to do longer term. I mean, moving forward, I'm going to want to see still, I mean, it is a business, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's personalized care, and I want to take time, but I also want to be efficient and want to be able to fill a schedule and, obviously be able to hire people and pay their salary. So, so I think right now is I will be a little bit more haphazard with how people come in. The other thing is I have prior patients who, despite some, with my website or even like a recent like kind of hello email I did, people don't necessarily understand that I'm not doing orthopedics exactly right now. So that's the other thing that I'm kind of have to like deal with a little bit, is see like when people are coming in or when I'm talking to them on the phone, like I'm having lots of phone conversations that I don't necessarily plan to have moving forward, kind of explaining what I'm doing, explaining that I'm not really their orthopedic surgeon anymore, which is hard. And so I'm trying to kind of figure out how to manage that, which I think will get better and go away over time. And maybe once my non-compete's over, I will incorporate some office orthopedics again too. So I think I just have a little bit of the unknown there that will have to become much more structured moving forward.
May I share a couple things with you, like as you're on this journey? Would that be okay with you?
Absolutely.
So especially with where you're at, I would definitely put in a KPI around like your referral rate. Mm-hmm. Because if you've been in that market for years, people love you, they want to support you, that finding out like where these people are coming from, and there's like obviously the social media efforts, marketing efforts on like SEO or whatever else, but when someone's like, hey, I just saw Dr. Adrienne Towsen and she blew my freaking mind, and now they tell everybody. Tracking that would be so helpful. And then also probably a couple other things is around like, do you have a wait list already in place? Like, do you have like where someone can jump in and there's a huge wait list?
I don't have a huge wait list. I have a place where people can go from the website, to like, book an online consultation. Yeah. Yeah,
perfect. It's something like a scheduler is going to help you so freaking much. That's awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are, looking at, not just looking ahead, but looking at where you're at now, and it's obviously very early in the game, but even getting to this point, what are some things that have maybe popped up that, about starting a business that you're saying, you know what, I didn't really anticipate that. Maybe I wish I had, or some things that maybe even looking forward to that you're now analyzing, saying, I need to bump up my skills in this area.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is kind of the technical aspect of it, if you will, like some of the, so I mean, I think a lot of doctors, at least me, and I think a lot of us are maybe not as like, business oriented, that's one thing, or maybe even like technically savvy, computer savvy, things like that. And, I mean, some of what we do, of course, with electronic medical records and whatnot, I mean, we have to be to a point, but I think there's a lot of us who will like kind of push the computer aside, or something happens and we can get, an administrator or an MA or like somebody else be like, can you fix this? I got to go to the next patient, or do something, and not really ever like learn how to fix something or learn how it's properly done. And so I am definitely guilty of that. And so now when it's just me, like, I went through like multiple training sessions with the EMR. And then when it came time for me to actually try to put my schedule in and like block times for the, the days and whatnot, like I was lost. So I'm like emailing the schedule. I'm like, I know the trainer, I'm like, I know we went over this, but like I've gone to every drop down menu and everything and I can't do it. And so luckily the company's been great, and they'll get on with me and they'll show me, and it's very simple and simpler than I thought. So I think, kind of like that technical aspect of it, if you will, like the behind the scenes is like a lot harder than I thought it was. And I probably should have spent more time earlier on that I didn't think. I'm like, oh, it's easy, I'll be fine. It's an EMR, like it looked so user friendly. So there was that. There was trying to like create an email list and then send out like an initial email to, I had a lot of patients who wanted to stay in touch with me, gave me their emails. And so I was trying to do that, and then I was trying to connect it to an email for the clinic, and it was just it became my biggest nightmare, a couple days ago. So I think a lot of these technical things are, again, might be like a super easy thing for someone who does it all the time, but not for me. So I need to try to get better at all of that. I think, I don't know, I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. And then also like switching over to a direct pay or cash based practice. One of the hardest things for me initially was really coming up with like an offer or like a fee schedule or whatever you want to call it, and so, and my coach helped me a lot with that. But I will say that's really, I mean, it's very difficult for me. I think it'd be difficult for a lot of physicians if they're transitioning into that, from an insurance base to a direct pay. Is like, we did our research in the area and all of that, but it's like, what am I really like worth? Like, what's the value here? What do I charge? And it was very hard for me. It was very hard for me to like put some of that down on paper. And I had this open house and I had this nice folder I made with everything inside. And I was like so hesitant to give it to people because there was like this price tag on it, So I think that's really hard for us to, at least it's hard for me, to kind of value yourself, which is a shame. I don't think it necessarily should be, but, so I think that's a hard transition to make as well. But otherwise, I mean, some of the simpler stuff that was kind of fun was like this office renovation. Like I got an office space and I'd never really done that before, and had to like get a contractor who was a friend of a friend and, thought it could be a real difficult process. And actually it was super fun and went really smoothly. So that part was great. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, again, my coach has been huge too.
Yeah.
So I think, having somebody that, I mean, even just like today, I don't know, I set up the printer out front and whatever. And again, I have a printer in my house. Like I've done that before. This one's a little fancy or whatever. And like, it shouldn't be hard. And it really wasn't hard, but I was like patting myself on the back for doing it, so I send him a picture of the printer set. I'm like, look what I did, And he's
You take the wins where we can get them. That's for sure. Yeah, obviously, looking, even just talking to me, you could tell you're going to be insanely successful. What, when you're looking at the anticipated growth, I don't know, if you've sat down and mapped out, this is where I'd like to be year one, but, good problem to have, right? We get really busy. What, have you given any thought or what are your thoughts on how do I maintain, and this is you speaking, how do I maintain my standard as we do get busier? How do I maintain the Towsen approach to the way we want to deliver medicine as we get bigger and we hire more staff?
Yeah. I mean, I think absolutely that's so important to me. And I think you hire the right staff. I mean, honestly, I think you don't take on, bite off more than you can chew, so to speak. And, as we hopefully start to see this, get busy, hopefully quickly. Like I said, I'm very fortunate to have some staff already kind of waiting in the wings. I think that, again, I'm lucky for being in my community because I have people that I know. I have a few other people aside from the people that I already planned to hire who have reached out to me. And I know who I would hire and who I wouldn't, so I think I expand probably initially with, at least one, maybe two PAs, and then kind of go from there. And we worked very, like hand in hand with our PAs in my orthopedic practice. And I just value them so much. So I think really the bottom line is, hiring the right people and building the team, and I think I've always prided myself, and I feel like that's hopefully why people are like reaching out to me and say, we'd love to come work with you. Prided myself on, even through like the bad times of private equity and whatnot, like of being a good team leader. So, when you're the surgeon, you're kind of the captain of the ship in the OR, you're the captain of the ship with your clinical team in the office. And I've really been blessed with having a lot of good people I've worked with, but they've always, I think, given me the compliment that you create a nice team atmosphere. Like people want to work hard for you or with you because they don't feel like you're just letting the kind of giving them all the crap stuff to do or whatever, that you're definitely valuing what they do like for you and for the patient. And that's so huge because I think some people in my position don't do that very well.
Nice. I wanted to kind of wrap with this, and again, I really just want to echo what Dan was saying. Is I think you're going to be very successful, and I wish you all the success in the world. And
thank you.
Your story is very captivating. All the way from just being an amazing doctor, having the experience with private equity, finding an outlet through dancing and really leveraging that kind of creative art form to your advantage. And then now here you are, opening up. I think it's freaking amazing. The thing I wanted to button up with was for physicians who feel trapped inside a current like private equity backed model right now, what would you tell them? And then what should they fix before they leave?
Yeah, good question. I tell them start networking ASAP if you haven't. I think that my what I did through LinkedIn was huge for me. And even though technically I left without a plan, I didn't leave and feel totally lost. I felt like I had a good, kind of like network of people to fall back on. And I already had a ton of support, some within my community, but a lot within this LinkedIn community that I'm now part of. So I would say, yeah, like start networking as soon as you can if you haven't done that already. And like think outside the box and like open your eyes to people outside of your bubble, if you will, because I had been very content in my community for a long time. Again, as I mentioned, I didn't want to leave. I have huge, great relationships here, lots of people I know. But don't you know that like when I let myself kind of see what's beyond Westchester, Pennsylvania, I was like, oh wow, like look at all these amazing people out in all these other places around the country and whatnot. And it's just been like life changing. I mean, I have a consulting job with a med tech company as well. That's just a little bit of a part-time thing that I do, which I got through LinkedIn. Like so many my business coaches through LinkedIn. Other opportunities came my way, and so I think that's huge. I think don't feel trapped, even though you can very much feel trapped or stuck. I think, try if possible, if you're at all thinking about, doing your own thing to, get your finances in order for that. I mean, I have a very sad story there that I won't go into, but I had to take a huge chunk out of my 401k to live and then finance this practice. So I don't recommend that. So, but it is what it is and you do what you got to do. So I think, trying to, get yourself in a financial way to be able to do this if you're not already is huge. But I'm going to go with network.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just quickly to add to that, I left, and that's the same thing I thought, I left to practice in Jersey, which is where I'm from after 12 years. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of same mindset. I'm like, why the hell wasn't I networking with people? Yeah. But I think you just think hey, I'm in this bubble and I'm going to be here forever. So, right. Why spend the time? But, and there's a reason, even Antonio and myself were kind of gearing up to launch like a medical membership platform just to give people that, like you said, just a support network, so to speak, of, hey, how do we just improve our business? What's working? And, like you said, it's not even just talking to other doctors. It's, all right, I met a chiropractor. They're doing this. It's working really well in their practice. Let me try that out. Or what can a physical therapist borrow from an orthopedic surgeon? So it's being able to interact with different people, different personalities, so to speak, and just see what's working and what's not, as opposed to just kind of maintaining our little, closed off bubble, so to speak. So, Doc, that was really great. Really appreciate you jumping on. And obviously, I know you're busy building out this practice, but super valuable. Glad you can make it on. Just like Antonio said, much success to you going forward. And obviously, I'll be pinging you on LinkedIn. So can't wait to just follow your journey.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I loved our talk.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
And if there's anything we can do to support you, definitely let us know.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right.
Take care,
guys.
everybody.
Take care.